Welcome everyone to today's presentation. I'm Brendan Hughes, Marketing Director at Equity Trust. I'm really excited about our guest and what she is sharing with everyone today. Her name is Vena Jones-Cox, and she is a prolific and exceptionally successful real estate investor from Cincinnati, Ohio. She has a list of accolades and accomplishments related to real estate investing that are too numerous to recount. I don't even have enough time. But the one thing that she does almost as well as investing in real estate is educating people about investing in real estate. In fact, this past September, she was one of the featured speakers at the Equity Trust Wealth Building Summit. She's actually spoken at our past large events many times, and Vena's sessions are always the most well-attended, receive the most favorable feedback. And this year's session was no different. And because of that, we thought it would be great to invite her to share some of those same experiences on a webinar. And we're lucky enough to have her and that she agreed to do that. And before I get to Vena, I do have to mention just a few quick things. First, a reminder that Equity Trust is a passive custodian and does not provide tax, legal, or investment advice. And any information communicated by Equity Trust is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. And whenever you are making an investment decision, please consult with a professional. Also, want to mention that we're going to have a special offer from me at the end for everyone that's on today. Vena is going to be talking a lot about real estate investing, and she's also experienced with self-directed IRAs that invest in real estate. She's going to touch on them as well in what she's presenting, and I know she's used them herself and seen others use self-directed IRAs. But we also have a great resource for people that are interested in the concept of self-directed IRAs. It's a book by Equity Trust founder Richard Desich. He's one of the pioneers in this industry, completing his first investments with a self-directed IRA in the early 80s. This book is titled Self-Directed IRAs, Building Retirement Wealth Through Alternative Investing, and is filled with education and more than 30 case studies on people using self-directed IRAs to build wealth for their retirement. So if you stick around to the end, I'll let you know how you can get a digital copy of that book. And if you don't want to wait for the book, you can always call us right away here at Equity Trust. If you're interested in learning more about self-directed IRAs, you can request a free consultation. You can just call us at 888-382-4727. One of our senior account executives can speak to you about the different types of accounts available at Equity Trust and how the investing process works with an self-directed IRA. All right, well, that's enough of my stuff. I don't want to delay any further, so please let me welcome Vena Jones-Cox.
Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate that, and thanks to everybody who bothered to tune in. This is great. I hope I can do you some good, and good for you for working on your IRA education. It's important stuff. So what I'm here to sort of help you with, if it is an issue for you, is that there's a lot of folks that I meet that have kind of missed the boat on the charts we've all seen that say if you just contribute a tiny amount of money to your IRA or 401k every month starting at the age of 20, then you'll have millions of dollars by the time you're ready to retire. And some of us didn't get that message at 20 and are now looking at our retirement plans and thinking, how in the world am I ever going to, quote, save enough for retirement? We're limited, of course, in how much money we can even put into these plans. And if you do a spreadsheet, sometimes you look at it and you say, if I did the maximum every single year, I would still not be able to build up to the point that I need to be just by saving. And for other folks, it's a matter of I can't even hit that maximum contribution every year. I've got too many other obligations. And really, for folks who are in that situation, as I found myself in, contributions just aren't going to do it. You just cannot give enough money from your own income to your IRA to create a comfortable retirement. So if that's you, you've probably had the thought, well, I hope you've had the thought, how do I take whatever it is I have to contribute or whatever it is I have already contributed and turn it into more money relatively quickly if you're approaching that retirement age thing, and without doing things that seem unnecessarily risky, right? We want to make lots of money, but we don't want to do it in a way that it risks losing a lot of money. So I was in that situation too, and the quick answer, like the bottom line answer, is if you have any amount of money in your IRA, or you can contribute any amount of money into your IRA, and then you can use it to do quick deals that don't require you to have a lot of cash, it's actually a doable thing to grow the IRA very quickly. Now, as Brendan mentioned, I'm in the real estate business. I have been for a really long time. And so the way that I chose to do these things involved doing real estate deals. And a lot of my colleagues in the real estate business will say things to me like, well, you know, with the maximum contribution you can make, it would take me 10 years to save up enough money to even put a down payment on a rental house that I was going to buy in my IRA. And that is thinking based on the idea of very traditional real estate investing. And some of what we're going to talk about today is not what you would call like super traditional real estate investing, but they're all deals that people do every day. I mean, it's out there in the world. I did not make these things up. And things that you can learn how to do if you don't know how to do them right now. Now, a little bit more about me. Yes, I am familiar with IRAs. I would not consider myself an expert, nor am I an attorney. And when I am thinking about doing the sorts of deals that we're going to talk about today, if I am in any way unsure what the rules might be, or whether it's going to create a prohibited transaction or anything like that, I go consult somebody who is an expert, and preferably who's an attorney and an expert about how to do these things. And of course, I'm going to recommend that you do exactly the same thing. So what I am is somebody who's got a lot of experience in various aspects of the residential real estate world. I've learned how to do self-directed IRA deals. I've learned what the plans were. I picked out the one that really worked for me. Actually, I've got several plans. I've got a Roth IRA, I've got a 401k, and I've got a health savings account. And then I did something that I think a lot of people don't do, which is I applied what I knew how to do to IRAs. Equity Trust does an enormous amount of education. I mean, they do these webinars. They've got all the things on the back end of their website. They've got their one-day seminars that they do. And actually, it was largely through those one-day seminars that I learned the things that I know about IRAs. And I go to those things and I see there's 60, 100, 150 people in the room. And I talk to them 6 months later and say, so what have you done? Did you get your IRA started? Did you make any investments? And they say, no, but I'm going to. And investing in your IRA is something that, can it wait for later? Sure, you can put it off until you die. But at the same time, the longer you wait, the harder it is to build up the kind of assets that you want in your retirement plan in order to support you in the way into which you have become accustomed or would like to become accustomed in your retirement. Now, just a couple of things. I assume everybody who would be on this web class would know this, but these are transactions that you can only do in a truly self-directed plan. So if you're, I assume you've all got accounts with Equity Trust, but I meet a lot of people who have an IRA with a traditional custodian, one of the big banks or one of the big brokerage firms. And I say, do you have a self-directed IRA? And they say, oh, yes. And I've learned to ask the question, will they let you invest in anything other than the investments they offer? Because there's a lot of people out there now saying, oh, our plan is self-directed. And what they mean by self-directed is you can choose from any one of the stocks, bonds, or mutual funds, or certificates of deposit, or cash accounts, or whatever that particular firm offers. But if you try to go outside of that and say, I want real estate, or I want tax liens, or I want notes, or I want to make loans out of my IRA to other investors, the answer is no. So those kind of plans are not truly self-directed. Whether the results of your investments turn out to be tax-free or just tax-deferred, in other words, whether you don't pay taxes on the money when you take it out of the plan, or whether you don't pay taxes while the stuff's in your account, but then you do have to pay the taxes when it comes out the other side, is going to depend on the type of plan that you have. So my IRA, the one that I'm going to talk about right now, is a Roth IRA, which means I did not get a deduction for my initial contribution, but I also don't have to pay taxes on the money that comes out when I start withdrawing it sometime after the age of 59 and a half. There are lots of ways to mess up transactions. There's messing up the real estate transaction. There's just not knowing what you're doing, not having the right paperwork, not evaluating the property, etc. There's also ways to mess up the transaction within the IRA. Like, it would be fine if you weren't trying to do it in some sort of a tax-free or tax-deferred plan, but it doesn't work if you are trying to do it within the tax-deferred plan, because there are rules. There are things that you cannot do in an IRA that you might do normally. And again, I'm going to take you back to get educated about that. And for each deal, if you're uncertain about whether it's okay or not, talk to someone who knows. So let's start like big picture. If we have a little IRA and we're trying to build it into a big IRA fairly rapidly without having to wait 50 years to do that, we have to start with deals that don't require a lot of cash to be involved in. And we need those deals to generate multiples of whatever we have put into it, and we need that to be in cash during this growth stage. Now, real estate folks on the line who already are familiar with real estate know things like it's really easy to lend money out at 12% interest. Really easy. But if you have a tiny little IRA, lending out $6,000 for 3 years at 12% interest is not going to have the effect that you want. You need to be doing things that are more cash type strategies, which is almost always going to involve some sort of, for lack of a better word, flipping, where I acquire an asset or I acquire a right in an asset, and then I pretty quickly am able to turn that over for some larger amount of money so that I get back my original investment plus cash, right? Because the goal here is really to build up enough cash that you can start investing it more passively in something like hard money loans or notes, or things that generate more interest income over more of a medium to long term as quickly as you possibly can. So this is a cool trick that I learned from a guy named Dykes Bodiford, who much more of an IRA expert than I am. And it answers the question, what's the goal here? Because look, if you don't need to create $5 million in assets in your IRA, you don't work hard enough to create $5 million of assets in your IRA. But if you're thinking, well, if I had $500,000, that would be plenty, and you haven't done this math, you might be aiming at the wrong target. So the trick that he taught me is decide how much you want in annual income in retirement. Most people can come up with that number. It's usually a number that relates to whatever you're making right now, less a little, because when you're not working, you don't have all those expenses that are related to working, right? You don't have to dry clean your clothes. You don't have to eat lunch out. You don't have to do, so most people can live the same way on at least a slightly lower annual income. But whatever that number is for you, multiply it by 25. Just take that number times 25. Annual income I need times 25. So if the annual income you needed, and I'm only using this number because it's easy for me to multiply in my head, if the number were, I need $100,000 in income, you multiply that by 25, and that tells you you need $2.5 million in the account that's going to supply your retirement income. Now, the assumption underlying this is that when you're ready to retire, you're ready to retire. You don't want to be going out and doing deals and having to churn money. You want some nice passive income. And so the assumption underlying this is that it's easy to get a 7% return passively. Real estate investors can do that every day of the week and do more than that every day of the week. It also assumes that your income will erode 3% every year, or that your return will erode 3% every year due to inflation. So the reason for the 25 is that it's assuming what you actually keep in real dollars is 4% of that 7% passive return. So again, you want $100,000 a year in income, you need $2.5 million in your IRA, you need $200,000 a year in income, you need $5 million in your IRA. That is investable. So I don't know, that number might seem overwhelming to some people. That's not a big number for most real estate entrepreneurs. You know, $2.5 to $5 million is kind of where most people want to end up. So the types of deals that we can do, and I'm just gonna kind of make you a list, and then we're gonna look at some examples that I have done that sort of fit these criteria. Would be flipping. Like I said, the quick in, quick out. I bought it so cheap that I was able to sell it for more money very quickly. The idea of transactional funding, and that may be a term you're not familiar with if you're not in the real estate world, but I'll explain what that is. Small hard money loans, which are asset-based loans made to people who are not going to live in the property. So they're made to people who are using the property as an investment property. They're either rehabbing and reselling the property, or in some cases they might be acquiring them to hold on to for the long term. But it is important to understand that we're not making loans here to homeowners. Making loans to homeowners requires a whole level of licensing and NMLS numbers and things like that that most people don't want to bother to get. And even if you did get it, I think it would probably create a prohibited transaction in your IRA if you were using your NMLS license to make loans out of your IRA to homeowners. So we don't make loans to owner occupants. And then the other thing is leveraged deals. And by leveraged, I mean, of course, that you are able to put a relatively small amount of money down to control a lot of asset. So it's okay with y'all. We're just going to go straight into some examples. And these are all deals that I did in my self-directed IRA. I set up a challenge for myself that I was going to only contribute $500 to my IRA. And that is all I have ever contributed to it. I occasionally get tempted to put more money in, but that's not the game. The game was, how do I put in $500 and build that up to $100,000 in 24 months with no additional contributions. So the first example that I'm going to give you is one of these flips that we're talking about. This particular property is in a small city called Latonia, Kentucky. It's kind of a suburb of Cincinnati. You know, right across the river there's Covington, and then Latonia is a suburb of Covington. It's a big and old house. It's a 6-room, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It happens to be on 2 lots. And at the time at which I came in contact with it, it had been vacant for 10 years. Now, if you've ever seen a property that has experienced an extended vacancy, the vacancy itself creates some condition problems. When a property is unheated and uncooled for many years, you start getting paint peeling and wallpaper peeling and plaster cracking and dampness in the property, which can create mold. So it was a property that needed quite a bit of work. Now, the after repair value of this property is about $95,000. All the Californians just said, what? You can buy a 6-room, 3-bedroom, 2-bath on 2 lots for $95,000? Yes, welcome to the Midwest. Unfortunately, the repair costs to get it into condition that would make it worth $95,000 was about $50,000. So as you can see, this is a property that doesn't have a ton of cash value, because anybody who buys it has to then put $50,000 into it to have an asset that's worth $95,000. Now, just to give you some backstory here, the reason that it had been vacant for 10 years was that the owner purchased it as a rehab, and he fully intended to go in there and make it a really nice house, and he had architectural drawings made up. I mean, he had some really good plans for it. But then he experienced a series of health problems that meant that he literally just could not do the work to the property. He actually had tried to donate the property to Habitat for Humanity, and they turned it down because they actually prefer to do new builds. It's cheaper for them to build a new house on an empty lot than it is for them to either renovate a house or to tear it down and put up a new property. So the call I got was, I don't know what to do with this property. I tried to give it away. I can't give it away. And I'm wondering if you know anybody who would take it. And I said, well, if you're looking to give it away, I assure you that I will take it pending taking a look at it. Because, of course, if it was a $95,000 house that needed $100,000 in work, there'd be nothing to be done here. But I said, hey, you know, if you want to give it to somebody, I'll come take a look at it. And he said, would you do that for me? Are you serious? And I said, yes, I'm serious. I would do that for you. So the thing is, in order to make an investment in your IRA has to put some money into the deal. You can't just say, no, I got it for free and now my IRA owns it. So the deal we settled on was that I would pay his current half taxes. So he was, quote, giving it to me, but I would actually not make him pay the taxes that were due up to the date of closing. My IRA would pay that. And that amount was $300. I purchased the property in my IRA. I took title in it. And then I advertised it out to some people I know from my Real Estate Investors Association. And I said, hey guys, I got this property. It's a handyman special. I mean, you don't want to tackle this unless you really know how to get work done and get it done fast and at a price that you can afford. But the good news is it's worth $95 fixed up, and I'm selling it for less than $8. So when you put $50 into it, you'll be into it for $58, and you can sell it for $95,000. And it didn't take me a long time to find somebody who wanted that deal. So when the dust settled, because there was a second closing here and I had some costs involved in the second closing, my net cash profit on this deal was $7,100. I put out $300, I got back the $300, and I got $7,100 more dollars than that. Now, when I said you're looking for deals that produce a multiple of what you put into them, that's what I mean by a multiple of what you put into them. I mean, if the deal had cost me $300 and I made $900, that would have been a multiple too, but that wouldn't have been the kind of multiple I was looking for. Would I have still done that deal had it been something that, the deal where I was going to put in $300 and get back $300 plus $900? If it was a really, really short-term deal, I might, because at this point, I only have $500 in my IRA. I got to do what I got to do here, right? But, a lot of times when I show people examples like that, they say, well, sure, I mean, that happened one time. It's never happened again in the history of the world. No, actually, if you understand how to find deals, and especially if you live someplace where the median house price is not $400,000, sellers like that and deals like that come up more often than you might think. And in fact, I did another deal very similar to that one also in my IRA. And we do these deals probably 5 or 6 times a year inside or outside of an IRA. This one had a little bit of a different backstory. It's a 2-bedroom house. It's in a good area, but the problem is when they put I-75 through Cincinnati, they obviously had to cut through existing neighborhoods because they'd been there a lot longer than the highway was. And this was one of those neighborhoods. So if we were standing in the side yard with the camera pointed toward the other side of the street, you'd see other houses on the other side of the street, but in the backyards of those houses is I-75, which is a busy highway. So although this is an area that people desire, it's got a pretty good school system, this is never a house that is going to be one that you rehab and resell. It's always going to be a rental. It's a desirable rental because people who want their kids in that school system and can't afford a $150,000 house or can't afford $1,500 a month rent live here instead. This happened to be the last house that was owned by a guy who at one point he had, I think he told me 17 or 19 properties. He'd sold them all except for this one. When he called me about it, he was asking for a particular price. It was around $9,900. And that sounded pretty good for this house. But as I was on my way there, he called me and he said, I've got a problem. I unboarded the house yesterday so that you could look at it. And when I came in today, I discovered that somebody had come in and stolen all the plumbing and stolen the wiring and stolen the shower head and that's big enough. Oh, they stole the compressor for the central air. That's enough of a problem. But what was really like disturbing him was that they really did a number on the house doing this. When they sold the wiring, this house is on a slab. It doesn't have a basement. And so the wiring runs overhead, and they had ripped down the drywall in some of the rooms to get to the wiring. And to get to the plumbing in the kitchen, they had crowbarred his kitchen cabinets that were only about 2 or 3 years old off the wall. So they were still there and they were still intact, but he's sitting there looking at all these cabinets that are suddenly in the middle of the kitchen, and they ripped up the shower surround, getting to that piece of plumbing between the faucet and the shower. So he was just emotionally racked by this because it looked fine yesterday and now today it's a total mess. So he said, I'm sure you wouldn't want this house anymore, but if you could still take it, if you could give me anything for it, I'd be happy. And I said, all right, well, tell me what you mean by anything. Because I'm thinking, he was at around 10,000 and now he's going to be at around 5. And what he said was, well, if you could like give me $100 just to help cover some of my closing costs, I'd actually take that. So this is a house with an after repaired value. That's what ARV stands for those of you who aren't in the real estate business. It's what is it worth fixed up, the after repaired value. Only about $55,000. The repairs that he was looking at and thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be a fortune. Really, when I really examined them, it was about $15,000 worth of work. So obviously this deal works in some way at $100, right? If you could pay $100 for it, and your IRA had $15,000 to do the work, and you had somebody who could general contract it for you so that you weren't in there swinging a hammer in your own property, which you cannot do when the IRA owns the property, you know, you could potentially net maybe $30,000 or $35,000 from this deal. But I didn't have that kind of money in my IRA at this point. So what I did was I called a guy I know who is very into IRAs, and he and I had a conversation less than a month earlier where he said, you know, I've got to do something about my youngest son's Coverdale Education Savings Account, because I've got 3 older kids that have fully funded accounts, and it's paying for their private school, and it's going to pay for their college when they're ready for that. But my poor youngest boy, who's only 7, only has $500 in his CISA, and I got to figure out some way to make that into more money. So remembering that conversation and knowing that this guy does like this area because I'd had other conversations with him about it, I called him up and I said, boy, do I have a deal for your son's CISA. I will sell you this racked property, or sell his CISA, the racked property, for $5,900. Now, stop. I know he doesn't have $5,900. So I will make him a terms deal where he can put $400 down. He can pay the rest off over 5 years at 12% interest. And because I now have, from my prior deals, a little bit of money in my IRA, I can even loan him $3,000 extra in cash to get the renovation at least started. So this fellow came over to the property. He took a look at it. He said, this is great because with $3,000, I can get it in good enough condition to sell it to somebody else on financing who wants to finish the work. So the total loan that my IRA made to this other Coverdale Education Savings Account was $8,500, but I didn't have $8,500 in the deal because part of that loan was just me accepting purchase price in payments, right? It wasn't that I handed the CISA $5,900 to purchase it. I handed the CISA the deed for $400 down and a $5,500 loan, and then I actually also turned over to the CISA $3,000 in rehab money, which was included in that $8,500 loan at 12% interest. So my IRA paid $100 for the property. It actually invested $3,100 total dollars, $100 for the property and $3,000 for the CISA. But what it got back was $400, so that left me with a total investment of $3,100 minus $400, so $2,700. And it also had a note for $8,500 at 12% interest. So I went from $100 cash to $400 cash plus a debt owed to the IRA of $8,500. Again, multiples of what we started with here. The payments on the loan were $187 a month, so that's $2,244 a year. That's an 83.1% return on investment, given that my investment was only $2,700. And the guy whose son CISA I sold the property to was thrilled because it gave him a good start to his CISA. Now, as it worked out, They did in fact sell it on finance. They did a little bit of work, did in fact sell it on financing to a guy who moved into it and finished the work. And then that guy paid off the loan to the CISA early after about 18 months. And so I got paid back early as well after about 18 months. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this is all great if you live in Cincinnati, Ohio, or Louisville, Kentucky, or Kansas City, or someplace where there are actually cheap properties like this, but I don't have cheap houses like that in my market. You know, you don't have to be investing in your market. There are deals available, particularly in the note world. And if you're not familiar with buying and selling notes and mortgages, there's a lot of education out there in the world about it. But you can actually invest in notes that other people have already created. So there's already a loan out there, and you're buying the right to receive the payments, or in the case of our examples, your IRA or 401k or CISA or HSA is buying the right to receive the payments. So if you are looking for notes in markets where things are cheap, you can do deals like this that aren't in your backyard in San Francisco or Seattle or wherever you live. This deal was one of these situations where somebody owned a note that already existed. I had nothing to do with creating it. I never knew anything about the note or the property up until the time that the guy came to me and wanted to sell me the note. The note had a $40,000 balance. So it had started at a higher number, but then there were some payments made, and then the payments stopped being made. It was what's called a defaulted note. The borrowers had not actually made any payments in a number of years. I don't remember what the exact number was, but it was pretty deeply defaulted. This wasn't they missed their last payment. This was they have missed many, many payments. And it had the further complication that the guy who owned the note did not have any of the original note documents. He had a copy of the mortgage, he had a copy of the signed note, but he didn't have the original wet ink signature information. And that was a whole backstory about the original lender had actually gone bankrupt, and all of their files were taken over by a receiver, and the receiver didn't get everything. And then the receiver was the one who sold this package of notes to this guy in Colorado. And it was the guy in Colorado that was dealing with me. So with the original lender in receivership, and by the way, half of their governing folks in prison because the receivership was due to some apparently some fraud. I don't know the whole story there. There was really no way that we were going to recover the original note. And that's problematic, right? It's problematic to try and enforce, hey, you owe me money, when you can't produce the original piece of paper that was signed where the borrower said, I owe you money. So 3 years in arrears. Why in the world would anybody want this note? Because defaulted notes can typically be purchased at a discount from what is owed. Defaulted notes are typically purchased at a discount from what is owed. So $40,000 was owed on this. The hedge fund wanted $27,000 for me to buy the right to collect $40,000. Well, that's all well and good, Vena, but you already know they're not paying. Why in the world would you want something like that? Because if somebody doesn't pay on the note against their property, what are your rights as the person who owns the note and mortgage? Your right is to foreclose and either get paid off at the sheriff's sale or the trustee sale by somebody else bidding on it, or to end up acquiring the property, which one hopes is worth quite a bit more than the amount owed. Now, the thing was, at $27,000, with a note that was this defaulted, and this house, I'm very, very familiar with the neighborhood that this house is in. After repaired value on this property is only maybe 65. And I kind of did the math and said, do I want to pay 27 for something that probably needs work? You can't get into these properties when you're buying the note, but I'm guessing it needs work. Somebody who hasn't paid their payment in 3 years probably hasn't been taking great care of the house either. And if I have to foreclose, that's going to cost money, and 27 is just too much. So I told the guy in Colorado this, and I said, I'm not interested at 27,000. But I have a local attorney who works blocks from this property who might be able to help you straighten out your paperwork situation, who might be able to go over there and get them to sign new documents. And they did that. The attorney straightened it out, and of course the fellow was really grateful. And he said, well, let me know if you ever decide you want to buy this. And I said, well, I would be interested, but I would be interested at $11,000. I'm not interested at $27,000. So I kind of kept in contact with the guy over the course of the next year. I call him about every 3 months, and I'd say, so just wondered about that house over there in Price Hill. Thought about selling it anymore? And he'd tell me a story about how, no, they were going to reperform, and yeah, they'd made a payment, and then it was, no, they only made that one payment, and then it was, yeah, I guess we do need to think about selling it. And finally, a year later, I got this email from him that says, we will do the $11,000 net, meaning they didn't want to pay any costs on that. They just wanted $11,000. If we can get it done by the end of the week, we'll work up the Alonjan assignment. That's note talk that's how you sell a note. And email them over. And can we go through the same attorney that worked up the note for these folks? Because he built a relationship with my attorney, and of course I was very happy to work with my attorney to get it closed. So now I've got this offer to me to buy the note for $11,000. And I'm thinking, how much money do I have in my self-directed IRA? Because buying a note for 11 that has a $40,000 balance and the property is probably worth at least $40,000 is a lot more attractive than paying 27 for it. Then I got to thinking about, I had enough money in my IRA to close the deal, but I didn't know how long it was going to take to either foreclose, which was a strong possibility here, or to get these people actually reperforming where they were making payments. And I didn't know what the cost of the foreclosure was going to be, and I wasn't sure I had enough money in the IRA to do that as well. So I started thinking, I wonder if there's anybody out there who is in the note business, because I'm really not, quote, in the note business. I'm in the real estate business. And who might value this a little more than I do, that would just take it off my hands and let me move on with some extra cash. So I thought about this guy that I had met at a note buying event that our local RIA held, and I sent him an email, and I said, I have a defaulted note. I know you're looking for defaulted notes. I have one in Price Hill that I would sell for $16,000. The unpaid balance is 40. The current value, this is a typo on the slide, the after repaired value is probably more like 65, but I was assuming at least $20,000 in work. So the house is probably worth 45. Likely you're going to have to foreclose. Are you interested? And he sent me back an email right away that said, yeah, probably send me the loan file. I mean, he wanted details on the loan and the unpaid balance and the borrowers and all of that sort of thing. So what I did was I had my IRA option the note. The contract that I sent to the note seller was an option to buy it for $11,000 with $100 in option money, because at this point I wasn't 100% sure, was this other guy going to be the one to buy it, or was my IRA going to be the one to buy it? So I wanted to tie it up and have an option on it. But ultimately, I just assigned that option, that note purchase agreement, to the buyer's IRA. The buyer's IRA for a total of $16,000. So I have the right to buy it for 11, and I sold it for 16. So the difference came to my IRA. Now I'd already put out $100 on this, right? So I collected $5,100 cash for the assignment fee, and then it was actually this other guy's IRA that bought the note from the hedge fund. And the hedge fund was perfectly happy with that because as long as they got their $11,000, they were going to be happy. So he bought it for 10.9 because he'd already given me back my $100 option money, which came out of the ultimate purchase price of the property. Now, what's ironic about this deal was this hedge fund had worked with these borrowers for a year trying to get them to make a payment plan and get back on track, and they were unable to do it. This guy walked over to their house, knocked on their door, said, "I'm the new owner of the mortgage note on your property, and the free ride is over, and I need you to start paying, and what can you pay?" And he worked out a reperforming deal with them, and he's been getting $350 every single month ever since then. They've never missed a payment with him. So, you don't know how these things are going to turn out all the time, and I'm happy that his IRA is doing so well on that investment. You could have done that deal in Cincinnati, Ohio, even if you lived in Seattle, because I never owned a property. I never had to manage it. I never had to rehab it. There's other deals like that available. This is one that it's another one that just kind of came up in conversation. And if you want to find these kinds of deals, you need to network, and you need to let people know if you got a problem that a small amount of money can solve, come to me, and maybe we can do something that works out for both of us and we both make money. This property was one that a local wholesaler had under contract, and her purchase price was $5,000. Now, there's always stories behind these good deals, and the story here was the property was rough. It had been lived in by tenants for a long time. Needed, paint and carpet and updating and all sorts of things, but it's a good rental house. It's a property that, people want to live in, and they'll pay good money to live there. Just it had a ways to go before it was in that kind of shape. So she put the property under contract for actually a higher price than $5,000. And then one day she went over to show it to a potential buyer and discovered that the plumbing had frozen, and there was water gushing down the basement stairs and then freezing. There was like an ice waterfall going down the basement stairs. And she renegotiated the contract based on the new damage. But the bottom line was she had found a buyer. Her intention was to wholesale this. Her intention was to put it under contract and sell the contract and then let somebody else close it. And she had a buyer. The problem was the buyer was out of town, like on vacation or on a business trip or something. And she needed to close it by Friday, but the buyer couldn't come back to town and consummate their end of the deal until the following Tuesday or Wednesday. And she didn't feel like she could get an extension on the contract because she'd already had one extension. And she said, "My sellers are getting really impatient, and I'm afraid if I go and ask them for another extension, they're just going to say no and go sell it to somebody else." So I said, I can solve this for you. I have $5,000 in my IRA. I will loan you the money to close it. It's going to be, since we already know when you're reselling it, it's not going to be an interest rate. We're not going to say, oh, it's at 12% interest. I'm going to give you $5,000 on Friday, and you are going to give me back, you're going to give my IRA back $5,500 by the following Friday. And she was great with that. She thought, this is amazing. I get to close the house. I've already got a buyer lined up, and it's only costing me $500 of the $4,500 or $5,500 I'm making on this deal in her mind. So it only increased my investment by 10%, but it did it in 7 days. So if I could just keep doing this over and over and over every 7 days, this is all I would do. because it's like a 520% return if you annualized it. This is what I was calling transactional funding. It is funding that's very, very short term. It's only done to wholesalers who need to close a deal for one reason or another. And it's usually, and sometimes it's not even a 7-day loan. Sometimes it's like a closing from 10 o'clock in the morning to another closing at noon kind of deal. And you can Google transactional funding if you want to learn more about it. But if you have an opportunity to do transactional funding in your IRA, then that's something you might want to think about if you're trying to grow a little IRA into a big IRA. So I got $500 net additional cash off of that deal. And everything I've shown you so far have been flip deals. And not everything that I've done in my IRA has been a flip. And this is where sometimes people's minds get boggled about, if I only have $20,000 in my IRA, how do I even start to approach a deal that's going to be a $60,000 or $70,000 or $100,000 deal? And there's two ways to do that. One is to partner up with somebody else, and the other one is to leverage it. So we're going to wrap up the examples here with a couple of examples of that. I was approached over the summer, late summer, by a guy who owns this 6-family. It's worth about $400,000. His ultimate goal here is to get a bank loan, get an appraisal for $400,000, get a bank loan at 80% of that, and to take a bunch of cash out of the property in order to go do some more deals. The problem is it needed some stuff that the bank was not going to be able to overlook when they did their appraisal, because it was fairly obvious. It needed a new back deck. The windows really needed to be replaced. There were some things that, to really bring it up to that $400,000 value, were going to need to be done before he got permanent financing. So luckily, he owned the property free and clear. And he came to me saying, I want to borrow $40,000 in order to get this thing into shape over the next 3 to 6 months, so that then I can bring the bank in and get my $400,000 appraisal and take out, maybe $300,000, $320,000 for other investments. And he said, I'm willing to pay 15% interest on that loan, and I'm also willing to pay 5 points. Now, again, for folks who are not familiar with the real estate world, a point is a fee on a loan that equals 1% of the loan. And the points apply no matter how long you keep the loan. So if you have a $100,000 loan with 5 points, that means you're basically paying $5,000 in fees to get the loan. It's extra profit, right? You see these with bank loans sometimes. You can get a 4.5% rate with no points, but if you'll pay 2 points, you get a 4% loan, right? You see these things. The problem is, at the time that I was approached with this loan, I had a lot of my IRA money out in other investments. I had a couple of defaulted notes that I bought and some other things that the money was already involved in. So I only have $13,000 in cash that I could commit to this loan. 13 wasn't going to do it for it. But I sure didn't want to walk away from 15% interest and 5 points all paid back within 3 to 6 months. So what I did was I approached a colleague that I know from hanging around people who are in real estate. And I know that she also had a small IRA that she was trying to get invested. And I said, look, it's a $40,000 loan. I've got 13. If you can put in the other 27, what we'll do is we'll split the points and the interest rate. We'll split the points pro rata. So you'll get 5 points on your 27 and I will get 5 points on my 13 for a total of $40,000. And you'll get 15% interest on your part and I will get 15% interest on my part. And after reviewing the numbers of the deal, she thought that was fantastic because she had I think, only about $30,000 in her IRA, and it gave her an opportunity to invest that relatively small amount of money too. So if you have an IRA and you know other people who have IRAs, or she could have just partnered with me personally. She's not a prohibited party. She's just somebody I know. I'm not related to her. I'm not married to her. So she really could have just decided to participate personally in that deal, but she decided to use her IRA to get that tax-free. And finally, last example, and interestingly, this was actually the first deal I did with my $500 IRA. This little rental property is in an area that you would not aspire to live in, but it is an area where it's easy to rent houses. It's what I call a rental area. Probably 85% of the people who live in this neighborhood rent. So there's demand, and the property was actually pretty close to rent ready. I mean, it was, you could have found $1,500 worth of stuff to do to it, but the prior owner had just repainted it. The flooring was relatively new. It was more or less ready to go, but she was burned out. She was another one who at one point had owned a lot of properties, and she was down to just a few. And what was happening was that as they went vacant, she was selling them. She wanted to spend the rest of her life being an artist. She's like, I'm going to cash out of these things. My whole goal was for them to fund my retirement, and it's time for them to fund my retirement. And she said, I want $15,000 for this property, which is a good deal. I mean, it's a good deal for this property. At that time, it's probably a $45,000 house. Now it's probably a $60,000 house. Again, not in a spectacular neighborhood, but a good deal at $15,000, right? But remember, this was within a month after I made that first contribution to my IRA, my only contribution to my IRA, which was $500. So how do you take $500 and leverage it into a $15,000 purchase? Well, one way to do it would be partner with somebody else. But what a lot of people don't seem to know about IRAs is that the IRA can actually borrow money. It has some tax consequences when you borrow money in your IRA. Your IRA becomes a taxpayer, at least in regards to this particular deal. But there's actually private lenders out there, so individuals who are looking for a passive way to make money, who will loan money to an IRA knowing that when they do that, it has to be what's called non-recourse. Now, all that means is the lender gets a mortgage against the property that says, I can take the property back through a share of sale if you don't pay. What they can't do is they can't do what a regular bank would do and also come after me personally or come after any of the other assets of the IRA if they don't get fully paid back through the share of sale. Non-recourse means, look, the only recourse you have is the security of the property. So she had a mortgage, she had a note, but she didn't have any, the lender did not have any recourse against me should I not pay the note. So that's something that you have to learn about and sort of be able to explain to private lenders that the property is the only security. So I had it all lined up, right? I can get this property for only $500. I can, it's more or less rent ready. I can then rent it. And then my experience as a landlord kicked in. And I said, you know what, that doesn't make any sense because it costs money to operate a rental property. As soon as the tenant moves in, they find three little things that are wrong with it, right? They find that the cold water doesn't work in this faucet, and there's a gap under the door that nobody noticed. It's letting cold air in. And there's always like an extra $500 to $1,000 worth of stuff that you end up doing immediately. And also, although all the rent would have been paid to my IRA, if something really bad happened, like the furnace went out, and my IRA had to pay to replace the furnace, I'd have to make an additional contribution. And I didn't want to make an additional contribution. So my solution was I went and found a landlord who wanted to buy the property and who did have the reserves to get it up and running and collect a nice income from it. So here's how this worked. Before the deal even closed, so it's under contract, it's all lined up, I've got the private lender, I know it's going to close, but I went to my local real estate association and I stood up at the front of the room and I said, who here is looking for a cash flowing rental property? Of course, half the hands go up. And I said, who would like it even better if I financed it for you? And a bunch of hands went up. And I said, all right, so here's the deal. I've got a vacant but pretty much rent-ready rental property. I will sell it for $26,500. I'm going to need 25% down on that, but that's only $5,300. I am then going to carry the balance of $21,200 for 5 years at 10% interest. Now, how can I do that when I already have a mortgage on the house? It's called a wrap-around mortgage. And what it means is there's now two mortgages on the house. There's my $15,000 mortgage, and there's also this $21,000 mortgage that includes the underlying $15,000. So it's not that it's 21 plus 15. It's 21 and there's also a 15 underlying it. And in a wraparound mortgage, you try and get, you try and get a higher price, you try and get higher payments, try and get a higher interest rate. My interest rate to my private lender was only 8 for 5 years. So what happened during the months that this was going on is that I was collecting from my buyer $450 a month, and then I was paying my loan to my private lender, all happening through the IRA, of course. The money was sent directly to the IRA, and I sent the money to my private lender from the IRA. So the way that this looked at the beginning of the deal was I only put $100 into the deal. The lender was actually willing to loan me all the money, but again, you got to put some investment in, or you can't say it's my IRA's deal. So I put 100 in. I got back $5,300 in down payment, so I netted $5,200 in cash right away. My outgoing payment was $304.15. My incoming payment was $450.44, so that's $146.29 a month in cash flow with no expenses attached. Because it's the landlord who has to take care of the vacancies and the maintenance and all of that sort of thing. I owed at the very beginning of this $15,000. I was owed $21,000, so I had another $63,000 in, let's call it equity in that note. So my net to the IRA was $4,800 in cash plus $6,300 in this equity, plus I got back my $400, or plus I still had my $400 in original contribution because I only used $100 of that. So that's an $11,500 increase in cash and equity in 1 month, starting with $100. So don't tell me that you don't have enough money to do deals in your IRA. I've just given you a whole bunch of examples of how you can do these deals in your IRA. Now, there's a second piece to this story. 3 months after I sold the deal and had collected 3 payments, I went to a different real estate association that I'm involved with up in Columbus, and I said, hey guys, my IRA owns this note, and it's performing and it's producing good income, and it's a good borrower. I really checked her out, and I kind of want to turn it into cash because I need the cash for doing more deals in my IRA. So it has an unpaid balance. Remember, this is 3 months later, of $20,000 and some change, almost $21,000. My buyer put down 25%, so it's unlikely she's going to walk away from it. Also, she has a 780 credit score, So she's a good proven payer. I will sell this note at a discount to get the cash. I'll sell it at a price that's going to get you not the 10% return I'm getting, but a 12% return. And what you would have to get involved in this is $18,850. So if you give me $18,850, I'm going to give you the right to collect $450.44 for the next, whatever that works out to, 56 months. I had 3 or 4 people interested in that deal. Would you be interested in that deal? If somebody said to you, for $18,850, you can collect $450.44 a month for the next 56 months. I mean, can you do that now? It's 12% rate of return. The person that I sold it to happened to have a self-directed IRA, and that's how she bought it. So it was like all IRAs all up and down the line on this one. So when I sold it, of course, I can't sell my note without paying off the underlying note. So I paid off the $15,000 underlying note. I put $4,550 cash in my IRA because I owed less at that point as well. So this deal over the course of 3 months netted $5,200 in down payment, $4,550 at the note sale, and about $350 in total in monthly payments, because that was the difference between the incoming payment and the outgoing payment for 3 months. That's $10,100 from initial $100 investment. You can do this even if you have a little bit of money in your IRA. Here's what you got to do. First, you got to have an IRA or a self-directed 401k or an HSA or CISA. Equity Trust would be more than happy to help you set one of those up if you have not done so. You need to put some money in it. I believe the minimum contribution that Equity Trust will accept is $500, because I believe that is how I decided to put $500 in and not put $100 in. Learn the rules about investing in the IRA. Get some good people around you who know how to advise you on these things professionally. Equity Trust cannot give you advice that says, yeah, that's a good deal, or it's fine if you do that deal. You need other sorts of people around you, attorneys, experts, that sort of thing. Obviously, if you're going to do it the way I did it, you need to go learn how to do the real estate deals. If you've never been in the real estate world, some of the stuff I said, you might be like, oh my God, that's so exotic. It's really not. People who are in the real estate world do these kinds of deals all the time. My best advice to you for getting education that's actually, low hype and is really like skill building and detailed and local is find a quality local real estate investors association. Just Google REIA in my city, or real estate investment associations in my city, or real estate clubs in my city. And depending on where you live, you might have more than one choice. And you can go visit all of them and find the one that seems to be most attuned to actually helping its members succeed and, giving you local information and advice. And then once you've learned to do the deals, you just do them in your account. This might be a process for you. This might be something you can't start out doing right away. But if you don't start the process of getting the IRA and learning to do the deals and then doing them in your account, you'll never get there. I mean, if it takes you 6 months or a year to feel comfortable both with how to do IRA investments and with real estate deals, so should you start now and be ready in a year, or should you start 5 years from now and be ready in a year? So that's what I have to say. I hope you learned something. I hope you got some encouragement. I hope you take action on this. I hope you make this a valuable use of your time and my time and Equity Trust time by actually going out and, doing something about what you learned today. Brendan, I'm ready to turn it back over to you whenever you're ready.
Thanks a lot, Vena. That was great. Lots of great examples with great details. But you laid it out in layman's language, very easy to understand. So that was really great, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on here. As everybody on the call can can see, this is why your sessions are well attended, our events, and are always the highest rated. So thanks again. And I wanted to make sure, I promised at the beginning to have a special offer if you stuck around to the end. As Vena said, we can't give advice on what kind of investments you can do or how you should make an investment, but at Equity Trust, we do have a lot of information about self-directed IRAs, and we have a great resource, this book by our founder, Richard Desich Sr., Self-Directed IRAs, Building Retirement Wealth Through Alternative Investing. You can get a free digital copy by just emailing the address on the screen, webinars@trustdtc.com. Put book in the subject line, and we'll get that out to you very quickly. So thanks again.